The next topic that we're going to look at is that of dimensional analysis. So we're going to begin with the definition. To illustrate the definition, suppose that we have a researcher who is doing an experiment and he measures the time it takes for the experiment to be 2.5 hours, 2.5 hours. And then suppose for his research, he needs to know that time measurement in terms of minutes instead of hours. So he needs to convert the 2.5 hours into minutes. And when he does that, what he's doing is what's called dimensional analysis. So in order to make that conversion, he needs to determine what conversion factor will work for his calculation. So a conversion factor is a ratio that's used to convert a measurement from one set of units. All right, so in this case, that first set of units is hours. And we want to convert it into a different set of units. For our example, that would be minutes. All right, so the conversion factor is going to revolve around the relationship between minutes and hours. So what do we know about minutes and hours? We know that 1 hour is the same thing as 60 minutes. Okay, and we know that. We know that there's 60 minutes in an hour. So that statement is going to help me determine my conversion factor to do the calculation. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with what I know. So remember that the researcher measured the time and he measured 2.5 hours. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to multiply by my conversion factor. Now, the conversion factor is going to be a ratio. Remember, a ratio is a fraction. Okay, so we're going to multiply by a fraction. Part of that fraction is going to be the 1 hour, and part of it's going to be the 60 minutes. Okay, and it's important that we get this straight. It's important that we make the right choice. So in other words, we can do our ratio like this. We can say 1 hour over 60 minutes. Or we can do 60 minutes over 1 hour. But we have to be sure that we get it done correctly. Okay, so both of those are conversion factors. We just need to pick the one that we want. Okay, so the trick is to look at what you're starting with, the 2.5 hours, and that unit, that hour that we start with, needs to be in the bottom because we want those units to cancel out. Okay, so the only way they're going to cancel out is if we have one in the top and one in the bottom. All right, so I know now that I need the hour part on the bottom. Okay, so I'm going to put the 1 hour on the bottom. So I'm looking at this conversion factor, and I'm going to put 60 minutes on the top. And now we're actually going to do that multiplication. All right, so remember that when you're multiplying fractions by anything else, by another fraction, by a number, whatever, you're going to multiply the top part of the fractions together and the bottom part of the fractions together. And we assume that this 2.5, because it's just a regular number, we assume that it's over 1 right now. Okay, since there's nothing underneath, we assume it's a 1. So on my calculator, I'm going to do 2.5 times 60. All right, that's going to give me 150. And then on the bottom, 1 times 1, that's going to be 1. Now look at what happens to your units here. All right, so we've already said that the hour on the top is going to cancel with the hour on the bottom. And so that is only going to leave me, in terms of units, with minutes. All right, and so we'll just kind of simplify that a little bit. So we've got 150 minutes for our answer. All right, so we started with 2.5 hours. We used a conversion factor, and we're now into 150 minutes. The same time frame, just 2.5 hours versus 150 minutes. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're just going to practice coming up with this conversion factor. All right, so we're just going to look at some examples. This first example, we're going to start with meters, and we want to end with centimeters. Okay, and we just want to write down the conversion factor that we will need to use. Okay, so what do I know about the relationship between meters and centimeters? Now, you may need to Google this, or your instructor may give you a list of different equivalencies, all right? But I'm going to go ahead and just kind of write at the top that 1 meter is the same thing as 100 centimeters. Okay, so again, the expectation is not necessarily that you know that, but that you can find it, either from something that your instructor gives you or simply going online and looking up how many centimeters is in a meter. Okay, so that you can get that statement that we're going to use. Now remember, we're going to write this as a fraction, and so that fraction is either going to be 1 meter over 100 centimeters, or it's going to be 100 centimeters over 1 meter. And we just have to decide which one we want to use. Okay, so look at where we're going to start. We're starting with meters. Now, this doesn't give me a number, so we're just dealing with the units here. Okay, remember that you're going to take your starting number, starting value, starting unit, whatever the case may be. You're going to multiply by the conversion factor. And you need units to cancel. So you need, in the bottom of this fraction, if you're starting with meters, you need meters in the bottom of the fraction so that they're going to cancel out. All right, so I'm going to look back up at my conversion factors. I need the meter in the bottom, so that's going to mean that it's this one. All right, so I'm going to do 1 meter, and I'm going to do 100 centimeters. Now, for this particular problem, all they're asking you for is the conversion factor. So they're not really asking you to do the calculation. They're just saying, hey, what's the conversion factor? This is your conversion factor right here. And so that's going to be your answer to this particular problem. All right, so let's try another one. We're going to just kind of run through a few of these. All right, so the next one asks us to convert starting with yards and then converting to feet. So again, we want to look at what do we know. I know that 1 yard is equal to 3 feet, or that there are 3 feet in a yard. Okay, again, you're either going to Google that or you're going to get it from your instructor. Okay, 1 yard is 3 feet. All right, so let's set this thing up as a conversion factor. So I'm starting with yards. We know that we're going to multiply by the conversion factor. All right, if we're starting with yards, then we need yards on the bottom so that they're going to cancel out. All right, so now I can go back up here to my statement and just kind of fill in what I've got. So I know that 1 yard is going to go on the bottom, 3 feet is going to go on the top. Again, it's only asking for the conversion factor. So this is your conversion factor. This will allow you to start with yards, the yards will cancel, and you'll end with feet. Okay, let's do another one. We want to go from ounces to pounds. All right, so what do I know? I know that 1 pound is the same thing as 16 ounces. Again, I Googled it. okay, or your instructor is going to tell you. The problem says that we're going to start with ounces. We're going to multiply by a conversion factor. We want ounces to cancel out, so I know that I need the ounces in the bottom. All right, so that's 16 ounces and 1 pound at the top. All right, so I have my conversion factor here. The ounces will cancel out, leaving me with the pounds. All right, what about this one? Pints to quarts. All right, so what do we know about this? I know that there are 2 pints in 1 quart. All right, so let's get our starting point. Our starting point is pint. We're going to multiply by the conversion factor. Remember that you need the pint to cancel out, so you need to put it in the bottom so it will cancel. All right, let's go back up here and get our numbers. 2 pints, so the 2 goes on the bottom, 1 quart on the top. All right, so conversion factor is here. All right, again, the pints will cancel, leaving you with an end unit of quarts. All right, so what about this one? What about inches to centimeters? So again, if I go and Google how many centimeters are in an inch, I'm going to find out that 1 inch is equal to 2.54 centimeters. Okay, so let's set this thing up. We're going to start with inches. We are going to multiply by a conversion factor. All right, remember that you need inches to cancel out, which means that you need the inch on the bottom. So come back up here, let's get our numbers. We've got 1 inch, and on the top then we would have 2.54 centimeters. Okay, and again, it's just asking for a conversion factor, which will be here. If you multiply, you're going to see that the inches will cancel out, leaving you just with the centimeters. All right, grams to ounces. All right, so again, if I do a little Google here and look for how many ounces are in a gram, I find that 1 gram is equal to 0.0353 ounces. Okay, so I'm starting with grams. So what do I know for my conversion factor? I know that grams needs to be on the bottom so that the gram will cancel out. All right, so let's look at our units now. So we've got a 1 for the gram. And then for ounces, we'll put that on the top. That's going to be 0.0353. All right, and they just want the conversion factor, so that's this. And again, you can see that the grams will cancel out when you do the multiplication, and you'll end up with ounces. All right, let's look at, I think I have 2 more. All right, so what about quarts to liters? All right, so again, we'll have to look on our internet and determine how many quarts are in a liter. So 1 liter is equal to 1.057 quarts. All right, and so we're ready to set this thing up. We're starting with quarts. Again, when you do your conversion factor, you want the quarts to cancel out, so you need the quart part on the bottom. So that's going to be 1.057, and on the top we're going to have the 1 liters, or 1 liter. So again, here's your conversion factor. All right, when you multiply across, and in this case you'll have to divide by the 1.057, but regardless, the quarts are going to cancel out and you're going to be left with liters. Okay. All right, last one. Let's go from seconds to minutes. So what do we know about seconds and minutes? We may not have to Google this one. I know that 1 minute is equal to 60 seconds. All right, so we're starting with seconds. So that's the thing that we want to cancel out. So remember that you want to put that on the bottom of your fraction, of your conversion factor. All right, and let's fill it in. So we've got 60 seconds and 1 minute for the equivalent part. All right, and so again, conversion factor will be the ratio, will be the fraction, and you can see that when you do your math here, when you multiply and divide, the seconds are going to cancel out, leaving you an answer in terms of minutes.